Well, welcome to this Selling Canada and Destination Canada presentation. We're going to be discussing a fabulous self-drive touring route that will take in much of the best that Eastern Canada has to offer. In this video, by Eastern Canada, we mean a drive through the provinces of Ontario and Quebec. Along the way, we were taking 4 of Canada's most popular cities: Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, and the nation's capital, Ottawa. We'd also be stopping by one of the country's must-visit national parks, Algonquin, and talking about one of the true wonders of the world, Niagara Falls. This is a classic Canada touring itinerary. Let's call it the best of the East of Canada. And it's very popular among clients of tour operator Prestige Holidays. Here to tell us all about it is Denise Hunn, who has been setting itinerary programs for Prestige for, I believe, over 30 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, generally 30 years, Prestige. We're now in our 11th year. So yeah, it's all good. It's all Canada. We need everybody to start thinking Canada for 2021.
Okay, well, this sounds like a fabulous itinerary for anyone who wants an introduction to many of Eastern Canada's top cities. And it also takes in some spectacular scenery along the way. I'm guessing this is one of your best sellers.
It certainly is. And the appeal of it is it's a short flying time, 7.5 hours to Toronto. And it's the diversity of experiences that make it attractive. You've mentioned the cities, you've mentioned the national park or the provincial park of Algonquin, you mentioned Niagara Falls, but there's also the Thousand Island area we're going to be visiting. So, and the nation's capital, as you said. So just a host of different experiences.
Before we talk about this specific route, just tell me, in general, how easy is it to plan and undertake a self-drive tour in Canada?
It's actually much easier than what you think, really. It's all about distances, really. The main consideration is to allow yourself time to get from A to B in a sensible time, but also allow time to stop along the way. Because, for instance, if you're driving through Algonquin, you don't want to rush it. You want to have time to stop at the visitor centre. You want to stop if you see a moose or a bear or anything. So it's all about planning and to make sure you allow yourself ample time for the itinerary.
And before we talk about the things you're going to see along the way on this trip, is this a great trip for a first-time visitor to Canada?
Well, one of the main attractions of it is the diversity. And as I've already mentioned, the short flying time. Some people are a bit wary of flying 9.5 hours to the West Coast, which is understandable. And for anybody who just wants the initial taster of Canada, just to get a feel for it, this certainly would hit all the right spots for them. It's also very family friendly. That's something we should mention too. And if you're traveling with kids, you don't want to necessarily have a long flight with them. So although we're visiting cities, it's not heavy duty city visiting. There's lots for kids to see and do as well.
And we're taking in 2 large provinces here, Ontario and Quebec. So I guess the first question is, how long and how many days should a client allow for this particular trip?
For this one, I would always allow 14 nights minimum. You could certainly do it in less or to cut out one of the cities, but to do it sensibly, 14 nights is ideal. 16 would give you just that little bit of extra time, but you could certainly do it in a 14-night itinerary quite comfortably.
Right, okay, well, our first stop is one of Canada's great cities, Toronto, which has enough attractions to take up probably a week of your time if you wanted to stay that long. So bearing in mind that on this trip, we're going to be there for a couple of days, what are the must things that a visitor simply has to do in Toronto?
Okay, so the first thing Toronto immediately comes to mind is the CN Tower, isn't it? So but as well as going up the tower from the city, my personal recommendation is to always take the ferry out to the island, Toronto Island, because you're looking back on Toronto, you're looking at the cityscape from the boat, and that's the best possible view of the CN Tower. So it's a good way of getting your bearings, but also it's a good way of of seeing the downtown core from a different angle. You know, CN Tower is very big. If you're looking upwards at it, you know, you don't get the full scope of it perhaps. So from the island, get a great view. So yeah, a ferry ride onto the Toronto Islands and a visit to the CN Tower, probably my two first must-dos. Yes.
But it's also got some fabulous museums and galleries, hasn't it, in Toronto? And it's got some unusual surprises, like the Barter Shoe Museum too.
That's right. It's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Who would think there's a museum dedicated to just shoes? But, you know, the Imelda Melkos of Toronto, I guess. But do you know what? Even the museums are not heavy duty either. You know, the museum I particularly like has a great Aboriginal or Indigenous, we should say now, Indigenous tourism area, and you can learn about the Indigenous culture of Canada. So I think that's a really good grounding. Again, for teenagers, it gives them an understanding, and the parents, of how Canada was founded. You know, from not only the Indigenous people, but the fur traders of the West. And yeah, there's a wealth of museums, and they're all such good value.
If you venture outside of the city a little bit, well, not outside of the city, but on the edges of the city, you can get to the Distillery District, which is a red brick Victorian building area that's full of bars and restaurants and cafes. That's worth a visit too, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. The cobblestone streets around there, as you say, originally one of the major distilleries in eastern Canada, but now it's home to some boutique shops. You know, all the unique shops, a lot of Canadiana, handmade Canadiana things, great restaurants. I particularly like it sort of late afternoon into the evening. It's got a real buzz to it. We should also mention, if you've got time, the Toronto Zoo, home to the panda bears. From China, you know, and when I was there a couple of years ago, they just had cubs. So, you know, that's somewhere that I think is a great add-on to the trip as well.
Okay, well, reluctantly leaving Toronto, the next stop, or the first stop on the itinerary that you suggest is Kingston, which is a good drive, but why do you recommend that people stop there?
Well, it's home to the Thousand Island Cruise, and I believe that area is very underrated. Kingston itself was the capital city, Canada, at one point, so it's steeped in history. But nowadays, it's got the Fort Henry Museum you can visit, but primarily it's known for the Thousand Island cruises. Just out of interest as well, Thousand Island dressing was named by Rockefeller chef, who was creating a recipe for the Rockefellers, and named the dressing Thousand Islands because that's where Rockefeller was home at that time. So, bit of useless information for you.
I had to remind me last night, funnily enough. So.
But the Thousand Islands is a sensational area to visit. It's totally different to what you'll have seen in Toronto and what you're going to see further on in the itinerary as well. So it just adds that another dimension.
Okay, well, moving on en route to Montreal, we stop at Gananoque, which is the gateway to the Thousand Islands. Is that right?
That's right, and you can take a cruise from there as well. So either or, you visit the same general area. The main sightseeing stop on or visit on the cruise is Bolt Castle. You see it from cruise from Kingston or Gananoque. So yeah, either way, just a little, very pleasant little place just to stop and have a meander, stretch your legs.
Well, your clients on this tour have a full day in Montreal. What do you recommend they see and to make the best use of that time?
It's a great walking city, steeped in history, great architecture. I personally love the port area, which is home now to many cruise ships, but it's all been redeveloped around that area. Also, you've got Montreal itself up on the hill, so go up there and get great views of the downtown area, see the St. Lawrence River. You know, it's one of those cities where I think it's underrated as far as a visit goes. It's just a wonderful walking city, as I say, steeped in history. lots to see and do.
Another Quebec City steeped in history, obviously, is Quebec City, which is a World UNESCO site. That's the next stop on this itinerary, and you've got a couple of days there. So how would you fill your time in Quebec City?
Again, Quebec City, we're talking history here and architecture and great restaurants. It's got the Citadel, which we highly recommend a visit to understand how the fortifications of Quebec City itself, the only walled city in North America. So, you know, it's just one of those places where it's got the vernacular, by the way, down to the port area and Pâté Champlain shopping area. It's just one of those cities where you like to meander. It's not a bustling city. It's not one of those where you're going to get the high-rise glass buildings. Very traditional, very French. Well, a good mix of French and English, but somewhere where I certainly would want to spend at least 2 days myself.
Before you journey on to Ottawa, the nation's capital, there is an attraction definitely worth seeing that is just 15 minutes or so east of Quebec City. And that is
a waterfall that is even higher than Niagara Falls. I mean, who knew that? Why would you stop at Montmorency Falls?
Again, it's because of the sheer scale of the waterfall itself. You can take a gondola ride up to the top of the falls. You can walk along. There's a beautiful walk along the bridge over the falls itself now for great views. Amazing fall colours in this particular area as well. So if you're there in September, late September, early October, you've not only got a spectacular waterfall, you've got some fabulous fall colours to go with it. And that's something that we haven't mentioned. Ontario and Quebec are famous for their fall colours. They rival New England, so definitely worth thinking about going late in the season if you can. But Montmorency Falls, it's just one. It's another experience which is different to what you're going to get in the other areas you're visiting. So it's all about the mix of experiences for me. This particular itinerary.
As you brought up the question of seasons and autumn, is this a year-round trip?
No, it's not. Primarily, it's middle of May through to late September, early October. After that, the cities become very quiet. The weather becomes colder. You know, I've been to Quebec City, Montreal, middle of October, and it's been very, very pleasant walking out in sort of jeans and t-shirt type weather, but it can get quite chilly at night. And of course, it's the coolness at night that makes the trees change colour. So, you know, once the trees become bare of their leaves and it becomes colder, then we're into ski season. So May to mid-May onwards.
Okay, well, our next stop takes us to Ottawa, which, as I said, is the nation's capital. Possibly of all Canada's cities, this is, you know, perhaps surprising for the capital. It's the one that is least known, but there's certainly enough to keep you there for a day or two, isn't there?
Again, it's lots of museums there, but they're not heavy-duty museums. I like them because they're like the British Museum in London. There's so much to see and do in them. Great walking city again, but you've also got the history of the Rideau Canal and, you know, the history surrounding that. That's now a World Heritage Site as well. So you learn about how that was built and understand the lock system leading up to that. You've got the Parliament buildings, you've got the changing of the guards. It's a chance of seeing the Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, as well. He's quite visible in Ottawa. It's full of the embassies as well, which make interesting viewing. You can cruise on the Ottawa River as well. So again, a host of experiences.
One of the most atmospheric ways of seeing Parliament Hill is going to the evening sound and light show, isn't it?
That's right. I've never been lucky enough to do it. I've seen loads and loads of images of it, and it's just something that's definitely on my bucket list. But another thing with Ottawa is in May, they have a tulip festival. They have probably the most tulips outside of Holland. And the story is every year that the Dutch government sends Ottawa thousands of tulip bulbs, because during the Second World War, the future Queen of Holland was born in the hospital in Canada, or in Ottawa. And what they did was they made that room actually the property of the Netherlands, so that she would have Netherlands, what am I trying to say here? She would be a resident, a citizen of the Netherlands rather than Canada. So as a thank you, they send, the Netherlands government send the thousands of tulip bulbs. That's a great time to visit, always in May, every year. Beautiful, beautiful time to visit.
Okay, well, again, leaving Ottawa, perhaps a little bit before you want to, because there's so much to see in Ottawa, you suggest that the next stop is quite a distance away in Huntsville. What do you see along the way before you get to Huntsville?
Okay, you're driving through the Algonquin Provincial Park, which, as I mentioned, is home to a variety of wildlife. It's got a fabulous visitor centre which overlooks the park as well. The reason I recommend driving through to Huntsville is, although it is quite a long drive, there's only a couple of properties in the park itself, and they do get very, very busy. So, you know, I would take the drive to Huntsville a little bit further than what I would normally recommend. But once you're in Huntsville, stay for 2 or 3 nights. You can then relax after the busy drive. It's not a heavy duty driver. This is the thing, you're driving through Provincial Park with beautiful trees both sides of the road. You know, you're driving at a leisurely pace. So, you know, that's what makes it longer, if anything, is the driving pace you actually take through the park.
And do you recommend that people build in time to do some of the activities you can do in Algonquin, like the hiking or the biking or the horse riding, I think, too?
Or even horse riding, canoeing. There's a host of that, but you can actually do most of that from Huntsville itself as well. So you have the opportunity to certainly take a hike. You can stay. There's a great 3-night package that you can book, you know, build into this, where you go canoeing in the park itself and portage your canoe and that. So I think it's a difficult decision here, because usually the time restraints mean that you need to drive through to your next stop rather than stopping overnight.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end, or the final few days of this particular itinerary, but we end with a highlight, which is Niagara Falls, and I think everyone knows about the falls, but there are several ways you can experience those falls, aren't there?
There is now. There's even more ways, isn't there? So you can zip line now, which opened about 18 months ago, and I tried to do it, but it was a bit too windy on the particular day I was going to do it. But you can zip line down to the falls and get a great view of them. You can do the Hornblower cruise up to the base of the falls. You can do journey behind the falls and get the full force of it. Or the ultimate is the helicopter experience. You know, really, you should try and fit in as many views of the falls as possible, because they all offer something different and they're all spectacular in their own way. But yeah, certainly mix in 1 or 2 of them.
What does the journey behind the falls involve?
Right, so this is where it's a bit damp, but it's not. Well, it can be actually very damp, but it's a series of tunnels. So you walk through these tunnels, and then there are exits from the tunnels onto viewing platforms, which get you very, very close to the falls. As you say, one of them is actually behind the falls. So if the falls are in full force, you can get very, very wet if you want to. Or you can get very dry, stay quite dry by staying back.
Okay. All right. Well, the last day of the tour is day 15, I believe. And with an evening flight back to the UK, you still got time to drive the Niagara Parkway, haven't you, on the day that you're flying home, and perhaps drop into Niagara on the Lake, which I think for several times has been voted the prettiest town in Canada. And that gives you the opportunity to visit in season one of the vineyards and perhaps take home some of the famous ice wine from that region.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to, as you say, drive the Niagara Parkway, go visit Niagara on the Lake, have lunch at a winery, perhaps with just a small glass of wine if you're the driver, or a large glass if you're not. And yeah, the famous ice wine. Love it or hate it. It's a bit like Marmite, I think. I personally like it. I know a lot of people who like it over ice cream. I personally like it neat. But have you seen they now do a red version of it? And that's delicious, the Cabernet Sauvignon, and that's delicious. So I personally recommend trying the red version of it, which is a bit rarer, but very nice.
That's a good tip. Just, we're at the end of the itinerary, but just a question on the vehicle that you would need to do what you just explained to us. Presumably you can do this in a regular vehicle or an RV rental. Do you have any sort of suggestions on which is best, or one over the other?
It's very personal preference, isn't it? First of all, if you're self-driving in a car, the main thing to make sure is that the vehicle is large enough for your suitcases. That's, you've got 4 people, you don't want an ordinary mid-sized vehicle because you're not going to get your suitcases in it. So first and foremost is to make sure the vehicle is suitable for your needs. Go for comfort, something a little bit bigger, even if there's just the 2 of you, because you want to be comfortable on these drives. RV rental in Canada is so easy. There's numerous sites you can pull in at. Everywhere you go, there's RVs on the road. I personally prefer the hotel option, but that's me, and I like to have a proper base for the night, know where I'm going, and to stay there. But I personally wouldn't be adverse to the motorhome if somebody's a little bit more adventurous, a little bit more doesn't want to be tied down to being in Ottawa on day 13, for instance, or whatever. You can flex this a little bit more with a motorhome, and that's the appeal of that.
I suppose the point is that this is an itinerary that suits various clients. You can do it fast, you can do it slow, you can go at your own pace.
Well, a lot of it as well, we haven't mentioned, but a lot of it you could even do by train. So for anybody who didn't want to drive themselves, you can actually do Toronto, Niagara Falls, Kingston, Ottawa, Montreal, Ottawa, all by train as well. So that's another option, although you're more tied with that. It doesn't give you the opportunity to get out, stop your vehicle and get out on the open, to see that. Take a photograph as you go along. You're definitely more tied with the train, but it suits anybody who wants to self-drive, certainly.
Seeing Eastern Canada by train sounds like a great subject for another one of these.
That's another day.
Presentations, but
I shouldn't really have thrown that in, really, should I, on a self-drive when we're talking self-drive? But
it's good to know options of travelling around Canada. That's the whole point of this. But look, thank you for Denise for sort of talking about this itinerary in such detail. It sounds absolutely fabulous, and one that I'm sure many of the people looking at this video will want to recommend to their clients.
I certainly hope so, and they shouldn't be afraid of it, because if it seems a bit city heavy, it's not. So nobody should be concerned about this itinerary at all. It's perfectly paced for all types of clients.
Okay, well, thank you again. And for anyone watching this, for more information on this itinerary and other suggested great Canadian driving options, please look out for our special Selling Canada and our Destination Canada supplement, which is online from mid-November at www.sellingtravel.co.uk. Again, thanks for joining us, Denise.
Thanks, Steve. Talk to you soon.